Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead of you. Today, I have for you solving your problems and team selection combined. So it will be quite a jam-packed one. I will, of course, have my team selection, the transfer I'm making, and benching dilemma sorted for my own team, as well as benching dilemma sorted for yourself, whether to sell Rodgers and Palace assets and Saka, how to fund Mbeumo and Bowen, Wildcard 35, while I look at it, sort of Marmoush Captain, assistant manager, and much, much, much more. So if that all sounds good, then do subscribe. If you have not already, as thousands of you have not done so, who watch regularly, and equally, if you enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like on it. But time is of the essence, so let's get into it. Starting in goal, and it wasn't a straightforward selection. I imagine for many of you who not only own Areola, but also Martinez, that will very much be the case. And we will touch on Arsenal versus Aston Villa in my defense and also in solving your problems. But for me, I've opted to go for Raya. I think the fact that Spurs were at home means that they'll be a little bit fresher, at least attacking-wise, just given that they've got quite a lot of depth there in comparison to what you would maybe expect from a Thursday-Sunday turnaround. And the fact that just in general, West Ham aren't the best defence. Spurs have got a lot of talent. So that's one reason I'm comfortable benching Areola, or a couple. And then in terms of Raya, I think we'll speak about this more in the defender section because I don't want to take away from that. But I'm certainly decently bullish on Arsenal's prospects of a clean sheet. And I don't think it's going to be this lackluster performance that maybe some are expecting. So let's move on to the defense where we can discuss this in more depth. Now, you may have guessed that the partner of Neco Williams on the bench is indeed going to be Konsa. And whilst I said in the goalkeeping section, I would discuss it in more depth here, I did think that I am really taking away from one of the sections in solving your problems, and that will apply to more people. So I may just save it for that point, at least most of the content. But one thing I would say is I'm also quite happy with the fact that I get to go double Arsenal defense and really stack there as opposed to like hedging my bets. I feel more, I wouldn't say necessarily comfortable. I do in this case because I think it's the best decision, but I like the upside available to myself. So we will touch on that more in solving your problems. And I think it's the second section that comes up. Maybe the first, but definitely the second at least. In terms of the other two, Guardiola is a lock this game week. One, because he's so good from set pieces, if not like open play. He's probably not going to play left back, probably be Nico O'Reilly, but he's still got so much threat from set pieces that I don't think it's particularly intelligent to bench him in a much must-win game when he's got such a high ceiling. And when yours is kind of similar in the sense that he has such a high ceiling. Yeah, sure, he doesn't have the, I guess, impetus to win this particular game because Palace are somewhat on the beach, but they'll want to go into that FA Cup final in good form. And this is a really good opportunity to do that against a team that have been flying for the most part of the season. It's just got too big of a ceiling for me to bench. Neco Williams, I think Palace score. I've got Palace attack, so no interest there. And in terms of Konsa, it's very much the flip between him and Kiwior. But as for reasons I will discuss in the section solving the problems, I think Kiwior's not just ahead for me by a little bit, maybe by a medium bit, if that makes sense. Now we move on to the midfield where the big talking points will be. And for the first time in what feels like a long time, I get to make a very standard move, a move that I like for a single game week without having too many strategic implications. And I very, very, very much like that. So you can see that Savinho has departed and Jared Bowen has come in. In terms of the guy coming in, not too difficult. He was the guy I wanted. In terms of the guy going out, a little bit more challenging of a decision than I expected. Just because of the way that I perceive Crystal Palace's prospects in 37 and 38, and could Savinho start next week? And I'll go into that in a little bit more depth. I don't think he starts against Wolves, but against Southampton, I wouldn't be so surprised if he were to start. And you'd probably want like an extra Manchester City attacker for that fixture, right? The other thing with Palace is, and we'll discuss this later, I think they're going to be on the beach in some capacity, regardless of the result in the FA Cup final for game week 37 and 38, just given their league position as well. And as such, I wouldn't mind the sale of Ismail Assar potentially over Savinho, given that they're probably both going to be gone by 37 anyway. So maybe instead of having Sarr for the next two, I take Savinho. But I did think that the combined prospects of Sarr this week and next week outweighed the 1 week prospect of Savinho in 36, as well as Rodgers in 35. Bowen's obviously been discussed at some length in Everything You Need, so I won't talk about him too much there, but he certainly is my favourite person to bring in this game week out of anyone in the game. But it does mean that Morgan Rodgers finds himself on the bench. And again, there's a section on this in solving your problems. This is very much just showcasing what I'm going to do. And I don't want to take away from that, especially when the slides have been made for it. So I will discuss that in more depth there. One talking point as well, which we'll also discuss in SYP, is Bukayo Saka. And I'm more bullish on his prospects of starting and I'm more bullish on a good Arsenal performance at home against Bournemouth than I think most are. So for me, it's an easier decision to start him. And then Salah, I don't mind the bet against, and we'll talk about this when we look at Wildcard 35, or the no Wildcard 35 draft. So yeah, again, I'm not going to take away from SIP. I think this is probably the most I've repeated myself in any video at any point, but you kind of get the gist of it. I just want to show you my team selection. However, here is something I actually am going to speak about, and that is specifically Jean-Philippe Mateta, Ismaila Sarr, and Morgan Rogers as a trio of who to bench. Because this is one conundrum that I've seen pop up a lot, and a lot of people have some uncertainty about. It wasn't easy, but I wouldn't say it was overly difficult. I like Palace's prospects against Forest. I think stylistically it suits Mateta more than it does Sarr. I also think he's so good on the bonus point system. Just look at the Arsenal game where he comes on, scores a chip, very good chip albeit, and gets max bonus straight away. And for those reasons, I think he has to start for me. I also think his floor is probably higher than both Rogers and Sarr, just given the type of player and also the position he plays. So that's that. In terms of then Sarr versus Rogers, I back Fulham to make the game a little bit more difficult for Villa than I think Forest will for Palace, just given Forest's form. And again, we'll touch on this later. Sarr's in such good form, and I would say he has a much higher ceiling than Rogers, and maybe better direct goal threat. Coming off that right-hand side, I trust Sarr to just honestly score, because I think he's more clinical in the final third, whether it be like through finishing, also just like in general final actions as well. Whilst Rogers has improved, I do think Sarr's a little bit ahead in that manner. I quite like the stack as well, having Munoz, Mateta, and Sarr, and really tripling down, I guess, on that. And I'm more comfortable benching Morgan Rogers for reasons we shall discuss. So that's that. But one thing that won't be in SYP is the captaincy for the specific players here, apart from Marmoush. So we can discuss that now. It would be an insult to all those who have attained a medal to give you one for guessing who my captain is, following what I said in Everything You Need, or be it just the title of the video. It will be Jarrod Bowen. It's a huge opportunity. I put a poll out. It didn't get too many votes by the time I recorded the video, because I put it out and basically went to record. And he was only at like 20%, and that's on my poll. And I imagine that on my poll, there'll be more of my viewers. So it's more likely that more people will captain Bowen here as opposed to just the general community. And he was only at like 20%, right? And that's 20% of people of the whole vote. Yeah, but others who won't vote him won't even own him potentially as well. And there'll be a big crop of those people because they're going Brian and Mbeumo, or maybe they're taking hits elsewhere. Or maybe even they take a hit for him, and I'll take the 4-point gain. So he's a huge differential, and he has huge upside from a strategic standpoint. I think he's got huge upside for this game as well. I think it's a one where it's well set for him to actually deliver a brace and deliver his first like good sized haul of the season. He hasn't surpassed 12 yet. And if it goes well, especially like going against such a wide spread of Salah, Isak, Brian and Mbeumo, as long as it goes well, and one of them doesn't go parabolic, and even if they do, not everyone's going to go there, right? It could be like a huge rank gain. So I'm very, very comfortable with the decision. And you'll see that the vice captaincy's on Saka. Bowen's probably going to play. And if not, I don't really like too many of the other options. I was like, okay, I'll just go with someone I actually do like. And I like Saka's prospects this week. So Bowen will be my captain. Let me know in the comment section if you are captaining Bowen. I'm just going to put like Bowen captain and just like the comment if you are doing that. And hopefully this one pays off. He's been so good to me and many of you throughout this season. So hopefully he has at least one last hurrah. Right, now we can move on to solving your problems. And honestly, that team selection was slightly difficult. And I probably definitely rushed it a little bit in comparison to usual, because I felt quite restricted as to what I could say, given what was coming in solving your problem. But we have arrived. So, for many of you, the routes to your players like Brian and Mbeumo, like Jarrod Bowen, are through Morgan Rogers, Crystal Palace assets, and Bukayo Saka, all of whom I think you're probably not super comfortable selling, otherwise it wouldn't be a conundrum in the first place. And this is very much arisen for the fact that a lot of you just have De Bruyne and really strong midfields and really strong backs in general. And as such, someone who's good has to make way, right? As I say that, I don't really like selling any of them. But the person I'm probably least comfortable selling is Bukayo Saka. I personally think he's going to start every game from now till the end of the season in the Premier League. Because, like I expressed in Everything You Need to Know, for those reasons, I think he starts against Bournemouth. 8-day split. He looks fit enough. Do you really need to give him that entire time off? Would it actually be beneficial for you to give him that time off? I personally don't think so. For So that's that. I also think following a loss, you want some more momentum going into that Bournemouth game, just for a bit of confidence. And just to show yourself that against a side like Bournemouth, who have some similarities to PSG, some, that you can contend with their press, that you can keep a clean sheet against it, that you can score goals past it. And I think it'll be really good psychologically for them. Put out a strong team. The rotational aspect can't be that big of a deal because these guys are top tier athletes. They're used to playing in far more intense schedules than this. This isn't too bad when you have an 8-day split. And as such, I think he goes strong. And he has a tendency to go strong and keep that rhythm going as well, right? So I think he starts Bournemouth. Then I think PSG knocked them out personally. And then there's no other competitions, right? It's away at Anfield. Do you really want to keep him on the bench away at Anfield? You've already got to give him a guard of honor. You probably don't want to get embarrassed even more. I think he'll be really up for that game and just kind of making a point for next season. I think he plays. Then Newcastle come to town. Obviously, Newcastle have done a lot of damage to Arsenal's season so far. Again, I don't think they'll just roll over. I think he'll start. And then Southampton in 38, last game of the season. You almost have to give it to him, and it's a plum fixture. I don't really want to go without him. Yeah, you could get him back in 38, but I think he could return in 36 and 37 as well. And it's another transfer that you're going to have to use. Whereas down the line, I think I would rather use my transfers in a slightly more aggressive fashion as opposed to hopping to and from, if that makes sense. I understand that there's aggression within that, but I'm just looking to be a bit more aggressive and exploring more upside personally. So for me, whilst I was more comfortable with it yesterday, not so much anymore in terms of selling Saka. I also think you could do quite well against Bournemouth. If he hauls, I really wouldn't be surprised. And then in terms of Palace, okay, so this is quite interesting, and this is a thought I had yesterday. Following the FA Cup final, in 37 and 38, they probably won't have anything to play for. They probably won't be able to get into Europe. Their position around 12 should kind of be safe, right? Either most of the squad will be on the booze and, right, they won't be in the best condition for 37 and 38. It's also a wonderful opportunity for the likes of Kamada and Nketiah to play in that front three where they haven't had so many minutes, especially after such a high of winning, right? I think it just suits all parties. And if they lose, I think, honestly, they'll be a bit deflated. There's not too much to play for. You still probably want to give Nketiah and Kamada the minutes they potentially deserve. And as such, I think you could see reduced expected minutes for all three. And obviously in 38, it's away at Liverpool as well, right? So I don't love their prospects there. And it's very much then, okay, could you sell now and get lucky? You could. But I think the prospects actually are quite good for now, for Forest this week. Well, I guess it's on Monday night, so next week. And Spurs in 36, especially the time you're playing Spurs. Obviously, if the fixture gets rearranged, the Aston Villa one, it kind of changes the dynamic. But I think the time that they're playing Spurs is a pretty good one. So, for all of those reasons, I'm actually more inclined to keep and then just bench/sell Rodgers now. Now, the caveat to this is that the Premier League still haven't ruled out whether you could get a double game week 36 for Aston Villa and Spurs, in which case you'd want to keep Rodgers, right? Completely understood. But on the assumption you don't think that happens, especially because I don't think Villa would want it to happen, personally selling Rodgers, I'm more okay with. Yeah, they've got United and Spurs 37 and 38, but I'm just not overly convinced by them at the moment. We speak about this in the next slide. The other thing with him is he hasn't got the biggest ceiling, and especially in comparison to the other guys, and that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. I don't love his prospects this week. I don't think they're bad. I just don't love them, and I also don't think that the ceiling's the greatest in combination with where Villa are at the moment, which we will discuss on the next slide. In terms of Mateta and Sarr, they don't have their own section, and it's why I kind of discussed it in team selection. For me, this week, it would be Mateta, Sarr, Rodgers, just in that order. In terms of the forward benching dilemmas, I feel like they've been covered in pretty much their entirety. I guess you could say I haven't spoken about Evan Nilsson, probably bench him away at Arsenal. And then aside from that, maybe Jacob Murphy, I think I'm benching him in quite a few of the spots I've seen. But aside from that, there aren't too many that we haven't discussed. So what about the back line? Start Aston Villa defense or Arsenal defense? And I spoke about this in my team selection. Well, I said that I would speak about it in more depth. And for me, it's Arsenal. And I think pretty much everything points to it being Arsenal for me. One, they're a better defense. Two, I don't think we'll see too much rotation for the reasons I discussed in the Saka section. I think it's important that they gain some momentum and confidence against Bournemouth. I think it's really important, actually. And I also think that the split, the 8-day split, makes it not that big of a deal to play this game. I don't think Bournemouth have been great for a while, and it has been a while now. And one thing we see with systems like this that require so much physical output is a lot of end-of-season fatigue, especially if the players aren't used to it. So, I think that's a big contributing factor and something that necessarily won't just go away. Fulham often find a way to create opportunities in type of games. They're good against the big teams. And they score in these games, and they score very often. They always find a way. And Aston Villa are on the ropes, in my opinion, this season, like for this season, in a must-win game. They got dumped out of the Champions League. They lost to City, and they got knocked out of the FA Cup. What was looking to be such a promising end to the season has gone really sour. And not just that, they're now 3 points off 5th and 6th, I guess you could say, with Forest and Chelsea. And if they weren't to win here, right, from there it looks really, really, really difficult, especially because they have to overtake 2, and Forest and Chelsea play each other on the last day, and Chelsea and Newcastle play each other on the last day. So there's like guaranteed points for some of them, at least. I think Fulham are good enough. Like Fulham are 8th, right, and Villa are 7th, and there's not that big of a gap. I think it's 6 points. And there's a reason it's 6 points, right? This is Fulham side and no rollover. And I do think that's being a little bit underappreciated with this matchup. Like Fulham are actually a very good team, and you can't just expect that they necessarily get the job done. So for me, I can definitely see Fulham scoring. I think they can create enough opportunities in a variety of game states. Aston Villa offer you one where it's not like the most difficult thing ever to create a chance, unlike Arsenal's like 4-4-2 mean like deep/low, deep/mid block when they utilize that. So I would go with Arsenal defense, and I'd be happy to stack it. I wouldn't start the Forest defense. I personally think they concede away at Palace, and it's going through a bit of a rough patch at the moment. I don't mind starting a Newcastle defender. Trippier's obviously got attacking upside. Same with Livramento, even Burn to an extent. But I don't think it's optimal. I'd rather not, but I don't mind it. Last game week, I proposed to go Eddie Howe, and if you did, you would have picked up 11 points. But if you went Thomas Frank and went for table bonus, you would have picked up 20. So congratulations if you went there. I'm very much back to my roots of targeting table bonus managers, and in this particular scenario, there is one who I like, and that is Oliver Glasner. It feels like we've said that quite a few times this season. I think it's a good time to play Forest. They certainly don't have the momentum going into the game. And the other thing is, okay, obviously on the side, I say that they're not playing too well in general, and that's obviously a factor. They've obviously, like, goals aren't coming to them as easy, and this is a big factor as well. Not what I was going to say, but this is a big factor as well. I think earlier in the season, Wood was just constantly right place, right time. When this, like, type of dynamic change and the tide just seems to be going against you a little bit, it can be very difficult just to get it going, like, and just to start going again, especially if you're not used to it, right? And I think especially this season where they've been on such a high, this is such a drawback for them. And I'm not sure all of a sudden it's going to start flowing easily in this type of game. I think Leicester in 36, it would have been a wonderful time to play them now, get some confidence, get some rhythm, get some momentum going again, and then go from there. This type of game, I think tough. Palace under the lights, tough place to go. And the other thing is, they have a lack of experience in these type of situations, right? Like, no one really expected them to be doing this well this season. And they, in general, don't have a squad full of players who have won major titles, who have been in these like huge knockout games and constantly come out on top. And I think it will add to that a little bit. I'm not saying they'll bottle it as a result. It doesn't really seem like that type of squad, but I do think it'll have a factor, not necessarily a positive one. The other thing is, the floor of this assistant manager is so much higher than you would expect or associate with a typical table bonus manager, because the likelihood of them getting a draw is quite high. And that's a big thing, right? Because if he gets a draw, he's automatically on 8 points. And the minimum is going to be his 9. That's great. Like, Eddie Howe won 3-0 and only got 11. Like, that's great. So as long as you think that it's okay for Palace, I think Glasner's a pretty easy choice. They also have the weapons to hurt Forest's defense. They weren't even bad against Brentford defensively, right? Like, people will say they lost 2-0, but they're two just stupid mistakes that they don't make too often. And outside of that, Brentford didn't create too much, right? But I would say that Palace have certainly got good enough weapons to make it a little bit difficult for that defense. I also think the system as well is that it's a pretty decent counter to what Forest pose. Yeah, especially like if Forest are going to go deep with like a back 4 as opposed to a 5, and just having wing backs to stretch them, especially when they like in that aspect when they're deep, and like to stretch that block and create pockets of space. But also in terms of build up against like a 4, just having your wing back so wide, it does mean you'll score goals. And if they can start well and get in front, then I think it becomes a lot more difficult for Forest, especially with everything going on. They've also picked up, I think, only 5 points from losing positions. I think I saw on Sky Sports last night. So first goal, big deal. If you get it, which isn't so unlikely, you're in the money. The other, if you didn't like it, I think is Fabian Hertzler. Again, he's the only other one with table bonus that I think could realistically win. Big game Brighton, always showing themselves this season to be a difficult side to beat, or usually, at least. I prefer Glasner, but like I said, big game Brighton, and obviously they're coming off such a good win as well. So I think these are all like that is an interesting dynamic to consider. But in most cases, I would just be choosing Oliver Glasner. Penultimate section for today is Omar Marmoush Captain, and it was requested in the comment section. So here it is. I wouldn't. I get it, but as it says on the slide, I wouldn't. There's always a midfield versus forward aspect to things. One less goal for a goal, one less point available for the clean sheet. Not great. And then it's Wolves, and I just don't think Wolves are like a side at the moment that you look at and think, yeah, I fancy a captain on, especially on a forward, especially on a guy who's looked really good since coming in, but isn't necessarily like the most high ceiling asset you've ever seen at the moment. I know he scored a hat-trick against Newcastle, for example, but I think at the moment with how he's playing, and he's not playing bad, and how City are playing, and they're not playing bad either, it still doesn't qualify him to be this like really high ceiling asset. I feel more comfortable associating that type of ceiling with Isak, for example, out of the forwards, or Haaland, given how good he is, as opposed to Marmoush just yet. And then going back to Wolves, it's not just the form and quality for me, or the fact that they've got a really good coach, but also their mentality. Pereira came out and said that even though they've got nothing to play for, he's really happy with the group's application, and they're still really hungry to win. That's not overly common, I feel like, in terms of like late season, to see sides who have already like escaped a relegation battle just keep on going and actually look quite good. And it's quite obvious that they're still very engaged. So I don't think they're going to go to the Etihad and they're going to be like, oh, whatever, like big of a deal if we win. And City would kind of just necessarily get it done. They may very well get it done, but I don't think it's going to be straightforward. Even small things like Agbadu did an interview this week and he was like, I really want to play against the best. Again, like, and you could tell by the way he said it, the fact that like he wants to do this, I think he'll relish a challenge like this, and he certainly won't be taking it lightly. Cunha will definitely have his move on his mind about the summer, and like if he is looking to go to Manchester United, what better audition than to dunk on your rivals across the city, right? And like other players will probably be thinking about a move. Ryan Nouri potentially, in my opinion, a really, really good player who could certainly move on and do really well elsewhere at a potentially bigger club, with all due respect. And then in general, like I say, like below, in terms of stylistic suitability, I wouldn't say it's elite. I'd say it's about in the middle, because they can certainly be exploited in transition, but they can also not be at times. At times they can be disciplined. At times they can be compact. But at times spatially they can give up a little bit too much from a structural perspective. And individually they can also make mistakes. But at times I see really good individual moments from them as well, right? So there's a lot of like counteracting variables here. And for me, where they're all present and there's some slightly higher ceiling options elsewhere, I personally wouldn't. The other thing about Omar Marmoush is such a good runner. They do have like quite good athletes in the side in that backline to compete with him in that sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a return, or even if he gets a haul. I just think it's not necessarily the highest floor option, nor the highest ceiling. Somewhat kind of in the middle, similar to the stylistic suitability. And it just makes a little bit more sense to go elsewhere, personally. Finally, Wildcard 35, or as the title says, no Wildcard 35 draft. And as it says in the first paragraph, I don't think I have enough depth to my knowledge of Wildcard 35, whereby I would feel comfortable proposing a Wildcard draft to you and being like, okay, I think this, this, and this. So instead, I just gave you 5 things here to consider. And then there's very much a possibility that you could quite easily build a draft around this. And you obviously have your ideas of your own at the moment. Double Everton defence, Leicester or Ipswich at home, and then Southampton at home in 37. Wonderful. When building that wildcard 35, I think have an eye on your defense in 38. A lot of defenses that are pretty good for 35 to 37 aren't that good in 38. So you want to set up a rotation whereby, like, for example, maybe you just have Kirkes there. And you don't use him for Arsenal. You don't use him for Villa. You don't use him for City. But you just keep him for Leicester at home in 35. And in 38. And you know what? Maybe you go and get Hoyson as well, knowing that you're only really going to have one attacker from Bournemouth in 38. Wonderful, right? Maybe you get like Cliver and Evanderson, you're okay playing one, and then you have double for 38, and so on and so on. Just prepare for 38. Slightly different week. Could you bet against Salah? Yeah, you could, because he hasn't been in the best form as of late. And he has these periods, right? He's always kind of had these periods in the season where no matter how well he plays, he'll come down and he'll kind of stay there for a little bit. We've seen it so many times after AFCON, especially when they've won the league. Some of his mates will certainly be downing some pints and vodka shots and other things of the sort. They're probably not going to be that sharp. I think betting against him is cool. Like De Bruyne for the next two is cool. Bowen and Mbeumo are locks. Maybe you want Cliver in there as a placeholder for 38. Maybe you want someone like Morgan Rogers, and that's your midfield composition. Maybe you want to target Forest players for Leicester in 36. as it says in the last slide, and so on and so on. So I think, like, in terms of building, double Everton defense, other defensive assets who look good in 38, so maybe at least one Bournemouth one, potentially betting against Salah, but if not, then obviously you would have him. Brian Mbeumo and Jared Bowen being locks. You'd probably go Marmoush for his next two. You'd probably go KDB for his next two. And then you'd probably go Isak and Wisser and something like that, right? And then from there, it shouldn't really be too hard to build the rest. You don't have to go double like Jacob Bryan and Tarkowski or and Branthwaite because he's injured. So you could always go Jacob Bryan and Pickford, and that solves the goalkeeping dilemma to an extent as well. Jacob Bryan, by the way, really like him. If I could pick one Everton defender, it would be him. And that is it for Game Week 35. And that is all she wrote for this one, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed. I certainly did. I shall see you on the other side after what shall be likely a very interesting game with a captaincy split. And it feels like good old FPL is back. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like on it. And if you are one of the thousands of people who has not subscribed, then do so now, especially if you've been watching so many times. It'll just take you a millisecond. Other than that, I wish you nothing but the best of luck this game week. And like I said, I shall see you on the other side. Have a wonderful weekend and good luck.